outside of that, I think the other stat that I have is, where did I see it? I think it's 125 billion pounds of food is wasted every single year. So I wanted to share a couple of just kind of some little tips that maybe you can implement in your life on a daily basis, because it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You don't need to go dumpster diving, which is, a lot of people do dumpster dive because so much food is put in the waste from grocery stores. Perfectly edible food is thrown in the trash because it's past, I'm going to use air quotations, past the expiration date, when in reality, the food is still edible. So a couple of tips I have for you that you could potentially implement at home. The first one is to buy only what you need. Make a list. If, say you want to make 5 meals a week and the other meals will kind of be leftovers, make a list of what you're going to be eating during the week. And when you go shopping, buy those things. If you only need 1 head of lettuce, don't buy 5. Only buy 1. So it's super important that we really, to reduce our waste, is we buy less. Because I think as consumers, we want to, sometimes eat healthier. And we're like, oh, I'm going to buy all these fruits and vegetables. And then when we open the fridge, we're like, yeah, I don't really feel like eating carrots right now. And then they end up in the garbage. So the number one thing I would say is to really only buy what you need. And the next thing is to clean out your fridge. And what I mean by that is, to coincide with my first tip, open up your fridge and be like, okay, I have carrots, I have peppers, I have this, I have that. What can I create with what I already have in my fridge, so that food doesn't end up in the trash or doesn't end up in the compost? Peppers, even if they're a little bit shriveled up, they're still okay to eat. You can make a stir fry, you can do tons of things with it. So really look at your fridge and kind of audit, what is it that I have in my fridge to make the next meal, instead of going to the store and buying new fresh food, and then it just kind of this snowball effect of like this food constantly being wasted. So those are the one of the 2 major ways to reduce your food waste. And I would say another major way is to freeze your food. So if, for whatever reason, you buy a loaf of bread and you're just not eating all the bread and it's fresh bread, well, instead of just letting it sit in your cupboard and to get moldy, take maybe half that loaf and put it in the freezer, so that you're at least saving it for the next time. Because if you leave it in your cupboard, it's probably going to get moldy, especially if it's real bread that's not full of preservatives and crappy ingredients. It will go moldy probably quite quickly. So maybe put that other half in the freezer. Or if there's something else that you're buying and it's pre-packaged, like meat or anything like that, and you're not going to use all of it, put the other half in the freezer and save it for the next time. So some really creative tips I have for you on food waste and stuff that I implement in my life is I freeze a lot of my leftovers. So I love smoothies. If you're a smoothie drinker, you'll like some of these tips. So when I'm cutting up my strawberries, I take the tips of my strawberries and I throw them in a bag in my freezer and I freeze them. And then whenever I'm going to make any sort of smoothie, I grab a handful of the tips of my strawberries and I throw them in my smoothie. So now that portion of my fruit is no longer going to end up in the compost or in the garbage, because I'm going to actually eat it. Another tip could be that any kind of other food scraps that you have, if you're, taking carrots and you're peeling carrots and, other fruits and vegetables, take those leftovers, again, put them in a bag or put them in a container, and you can throw them in your freezer and you can make a vegetable broth with it. Or if you're making a bone broth, you could also add the vegetables to whatever broth that you're making. So kind of being creative in the ways that you kind of reuse what you have before you toss it in the compost or before you end up tossing it in the trash. So I keep a lot of my leftovers in the freezer. When I'm going to make some sort of broth, I grab the leftovers of the veggies I've been eating for the last month and I drop that into the broth, so I don't have to use new fruits and vegetables all the time. Another tip that I could offer is some fruits and vegetables can be regrown from the ends. So an example is celery. So I bought some celery. A lot of the time we don't eat the bottom of the celery. And what I did was I grabbed the bottom of the celery, I put it in some water, it started to grow roots. Then over time, it got tons and tons of roots, and then I planted it in some dirt, and now I have celery that I'm growing from leftovers. You can do it with lettuce. If you buy lettuce, you can, depending on the lettuce, I buy my lettuce, it has roots on it already, but you can regrow your fruits and vegetables, and it's to be creative in what it is that you want to do. Google will be your friend. You can definitely Google, scraps and how to regrow scraps, but I know you can do it with onions, you can do it with potatoes, celery. There's just tons of things. And not only are you not putting food and wasting food, you're also saving money. So if you could grow your own celery instead of having to buy celery every time you want it, you're saving money, but then you're also not wasting that food and it ends up in the compost or the trash. Another thing is, if it's possible, to compost your food versus just trashing it. If it's, possible for you, depending where you live. And then once you have that compost, if you're keeping it for yourself, then you can use it for your gardening or your flowers or your plants or whatever it is. So that, again, you're not wasting that food. Another thing you can do is, like I mentioned at the beginning, you could take old glass jars, you can take old bags, reuse those things, and that's what you can put your food in to put into the freezer. I have a neighbor that has an apple tree, and half of the apple tree happens to be on my property. The apples are amazing, and I am going to pick all the apples because it's on my side of the property, and I'm going to can them. It'll be my first year canning, so it'll be an experiment, but it's another thing. If you have an overabundance of food, if you garden and you're like, what am I going to do with 50 zucchinis? There's only so many zucchinis I can eat. Or you have whatever food it is maybe that you're growing, or there's a sale at the store and you're like, it's a great deal for X amount of fruit or veggie. Well, have you thought about canning? It doesn't have to also be overwhelming. There's great tutorials online, and you can learn how to can your food as well. And then you'll save money, and then also you'll be saving any sort of food from going to waste. And lastly, there are some great Facebook groups or different communities depending where you live. And there's one called Buy Nothing. A lot of communities there's a lot of cities that have a Buy Nothing group. And the principle of it is, if you have something that you no longer need or want, but there's somebody else in your community that might need that item, let's say you have a chair and you no longer want your chair, you can post in that group, I have a chair. And then the person comes over, you leave it outside, they pick up your chair. But they also do it for food if that's something that you're interested in. If, say, you make like a bunch of apple pies and you're like, there's no way I'm going to eat all of these apple pies, you can offer it to your community. Would anybody like one or two of my apple pies, because I am not going to eat them? So these are a couple of tips that you could potentially implement into your life one by one. Make them a habit. When you do something for 30 days, it tends to become a habit. So for me, when I cut my fruits and vegetables, it is a definite habit that I put those things into my freezer right away. So again, my name is Stephanie Moram. Thank you so much for having me. If you'd like to learn anything more about me, I hang out on Instagram if anyone is interested, at Good Girl Gone Green, and my website is also goodgirlgonegreen.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out as well. I
have a question, Stephanie. I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I'm always confused by, expiration dates, best by, use by. So, for example, if I buy eggs or if I buy cookies, best by, use by. So which is the real expiration date? So
well, I'm not going to tell anybody to eat food that might have expired. I tend to do a smell test. I tend to do like a look test. If I'm vegan, so I don't eat any animal products or dairy products, but my family does. So if we buy milk, let's say I buy some organic milk and it's past the date, I'm like, can someone smell it? Tell me if it smells, if that's what it's supposed to smell like. And they smell it and I was like, it totally smells fine. It's a day after. Again, you don't want to get sick. So I would recommend that, I think they just put those expiration dates because I don't want anyone to get sick. But if I buy meat for my family, I'll put it in the freezer before the expiration date just to make sure that it's still in good condition. When it comes to fruits and veggies, obviously there's no expiration date. I just go by if it's turned green or not. I think it should kind of go by choice. I think the expiration date is put there so they don't want anyone to get sick. They don't want anyone to basically get sick from whatever it is that they're eating. So like canned food, I mean, there's an expiration date on it, but the chances of it going bad is probably slim to none. It might not taste as good, but you know, that soup, vegetable soup might not taste as fresh as 4 years ago, but in all reality, it's not going to go bad in a can. So I think it's just kind of like I don't know how to say it, to kind of just go with your gut. And that's what I do when it comes to food. I go with my gut. And if it doesn't smell good, then I compost it.
My other question is freezing. I noticed that if I have potatoes in my dish and I freeze it, then and I retrieve it from the freezer, the potatoes don't freeze very well. They kind of get all mushy. Is it because potatoes absorb a lot of moisture?
Are you talking about like already pre-cooked potatoes or like a raw potato?
Pre-cooked.
Yeah, like some fruits and vegetables are probably not going to freeze that well. And so what you could do is, say you freeze like mashed potatoes, and when it thaws out and you're like, it doesn't taste very good, you could just throw it in a soup. You know what I mean? Okay. Or you could maybe fry it up in a pan and make like a potato pancake or something like that if you don't like the taste of what the mashed potato would taste like. And I think it's all about being creative and thinking of ways, how can I not put this in the garbage right now? And how could I avoid putting it in the compost if I don't need to put it into the compost? And like I said, not everything freezes really, really well. Stuff gets freezer burned, but I still freeze stuff. And then when I take it out of the freezer, I mean, obviously if you leave meat in the freezer for an extended period of time, it usually kind of doesn't look very good. I would suggest also eating the food, have a turnover in your freezer. So if you're constantly putting stuff in the freezer, make sure the stuff that you put in the first away, bringing it to the front, and you want to reuse that stuff before you start consuming the stuff you just put in your freezer, just to make sure it kind of stays fresh and better.
What you said made a lot of sense. Buy only what you need, because with all these stores like Costco, Sam's Club, etc., people tend to buy so much, and especially when there are scares like hurricanes or the pandemic, everyone overbuys, and that's why we don't have toilet paper on the shelves. So I mean, growing up in India, we were always told not to waste our food because people in some other country don't have enough. So we've grown up with that consciousness. But sadly, in a lot of schools, I guess if children serve themselves an apple or a pear or anything and it's not eaten, they have to throw it away. So that's just policy. So there's a lot of
my kids, this is all they know, right? They've grown up in consuming less, composting. This is all they know. So my kids, they'll eat a banana at school and they bring me back the banana peel and I compost it. Or my son will eat an apple and he sticks it in a pocket in his lunchbox. And he's like, I brought the apple peel back and I put it in the compost. Like, they don't always remember, but it's just kind of a habit for them where they don't throw out any of their food. If they don't finish eating their food, it stays in their container. And when it comes home, I open it up. And if it's hot mess express and the food is just not edible anymore, then I put it in the compost. But if it's still edible, whatever was in their lunch, I keep it, I put it in the fridge, or I give it to them the next day. But that's also my kids, that's all they know. So
I see that Elton has a question.
Yes. Wow. I mean, Stephanie, you're just amazing. I appreciate your presentation. But, when it comes to foods and, acquisition, for curating them and getting the maximum benefit, I mean, it's what happens is, my problem is that you go to the grocer, they have special programs or special opportunities to sell and to reduce the cost. And so I'm always trying to, you're trying to be meager and very modest and save money wherever you can. And so, you find yourself there. I mean, and also when it comes to sharing. So, so at the end of the day, I mean, is there a rule of thumb of how, I mean, I don't know. I never forget, this is my problem, that, when I was in Los Angeles and I was visiting my brother, and there was a sale, and they had a sale on eggs. And I bought 3 dozen eggs for like $2-3. My brother and his wife teased me, but I was going to be there for 2 weeks. I thought that I would always have eggs, while I was there. So the point of it is there a rule of thumb about how you should manage the grocer's promotions?
I think if you're going to eat the 3 cartons of eggs and you're buying them on sale and you're going to save money, then absolutely. And you have the space to put the 3 cartons of eggs, and absolutely buy it. I think the biggest problem we have is, oh my gosh, those carton of eggs are on sale, and you buy them with the hopes that you're going to actually eat them. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks go by, and now they're rotten, and we don't eat them. So I think it's just to find that balance of, you have such good intention. And when I say you, I don't necessarily mean you, but people have such good intention. I'm going to buy 3 heads of lettuce, and I'm going to buy kale, and I'm going to buy all this food. I'm going to make this big salad on, this is Monday. And then by Friday, you're like, what was I thinking? I don't want a kale salad. I don't want this. I don't want that. And then it ends up in the garbage. So it's just to be mindful of, am I actually going to eat this versus buying something just because it's on sale, and then not even eating it at all.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like anything else, I guess, proceeding to a balance. So you eat healthily, nutritiously, and at a modest rate or modest, cost plus weight. Good deal. Good deal. Thank you for that.
Claire, I think Claire has a question.
No, actually, I have I want Dr. John. Dr. John, he is going to talk about a little later after Danica. He's going to talk about diabetes and oncology. So is there any special diet trick when it comes to saving food or household tips that would help this audience, Dr. John?
I'm sorry, repeat that question again.
When you're trying to save food for diabetics, because, when you buy healthy food, it's always more expensive. So I wanted to know if you had any personal tips that you could share.
Well, I'm so glad to listen to Ramona. She started saying, don't waste food. My point is, don't put it in your waste. So
that's cute.
So it's an extension of what she's saying. First, she's saying that don't buy more than you need. But I'm going one step further. Don't eat more than you need. So the question is, and that will go with what she is saying, first you need to know how much are you going to need. The fact of the matter is, when you sit down to eat, you have no clue what your body is looking for. You can never figure out when you are going to be hungry, right? So what is the physiological mechanism that makes your brain feel or create the sensation of hunger? Let's go back up a little bit. When you're thirsty, can you predetermine the amount of water that will take to quench your thirst? Nobody can. As you are drinking, you decide, and when your thirst is quenched, you stop. And each time, the volume of water you drank is different. And think about it one more minute. By the time you finish drinking, that water is still in your stomach. It has not been absorbed yet. How did your brain know you consumed enough water to quench your thirst? How did the brain know that? Is there a similar mechanism for solid foods also? The best example is toddlers, any child from 2 to 6 years of age. You will observe 3 things. 1, they will eat only when they are hungry. 2, they will pick and choose. You can give them 10 items. They will pick and choose what they like. 3, when they stop enjoying the food, they will stop eating. They could care less what is left on the plate. What do? Our trigger to eat is not our need. It is what visual or smell, or somebody's a party, or you are at a meeting. It is a business meeting and you are obliged to eat, or it's a birthday or a celebration. So the starting is not based on hunger. Then you cannot, you have to please the host. Whatever is cooked, You have to at least sample it, taste it, or take it home and eat it. So what you choose, especially if you are going for a buffet, you have to get your money's worth. So you keep putting on the plate. And once you put it on the plate, you cannot waste it. As Ramona said, we are brainwashed. We cannot waste food because somebody else is hungry in some other place on earth. So you have to eat it for them. I don't know how it works, but that is how we are taught. So we finish eating and the body gets excess. The third point is, what is your signal for stopping? If you look at nature, there are no food packaging in nature that adult humans can get nutrients from without chewing. Think about that. Every food that Ms. Moran has been talking about, they all require chewing when you go and buy. Why? Because when you chew, you are releasing nutrients which can be picked up by the receptors in the mouth and nose, the taste buds and smell receptors, report to the brain what you are eating, how much is going down. So similar to water, when you are drinking, the taste buds are monitoring not only what you are drinking, whether it is water or wine or whatever, but also metering how much is going down. So when the intake matches the deficit, the brain creates a sensation of quenching the thirst. Similarly, when you take that first bite, if you're hungry, you will enjoy it. But after 5-10 minutes of eating, your degree of enjoyment has gone down. The bite is not as enjoyable. That is your brain telling you you had enough of that particular nutrient or nutrients in that food. Stop it. Now you can go back and eat again later. That is why we need multiple meals. You cannot get all the 100 different nutrients you need in one meal or one food group. So this, all you have to do is to follow your physiology, follow your own brain, because nobody else knows what your body needs at any given time. So I will stop here. If you have any other questions, I can answer.
Yeah, so go back to Stephanie. Ramona, let's just go back to Stephanie. And
Okay.
if you can wrap up and then
Yes.
more speakers. Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you so much for all these pearls of wisdom. I'll think twice before throwing away my carrot peels and tomato peels and fruit peels. And I'll think about that pot of soup that's on the stove. But thank you for raising our consciousness about waste and how to be prudent about food waste. So
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job. Good job.
So I think we have Danica.
Yes, I'm going to just. Okay, let me get her slide up. Okay, so Danica, why don't you introduce us to Fabrica? Danica's only going to do an introduction today, and she's going to, let me see, where am I? Oh dear, where's her slide? Okay. There we go. Danica, over to you.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. I appreciate you having me. So just a little bit about me and the company. I work for Fabric Hut, which is one of the largest